The grocery store buzzed with the mundane chaos of a sweltering Georgia afternoon. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, giving the beige linoleum floors an almost sickly hue. People shuffled along the aisles with furrowed brows, fanning themselves with flimsy receipts, muttering complaints about long lines, expired coupons, and the unbearable heat. The faint hum of the refrigeration units seemed to fill every corner with a droning monotony. Lena Avery leaned against her cart, letting her eyes wander over the items she needed: water, protein bars, bleach, a few canned goods. Her shoulders were squared, her posture unassuming, but there was a quiet authority about her presence. People didn't notice her, not really, because she moved with the kind of grace that made her almost invisible in crowds, and that invisibility had saved her more times than she could count. Until now. A broad-shouldered man in scuffed construction boots barreled down the aisle, muttering under his breath. His face was red from frustration, veins bulging in his neck. Lena instinctively took a half-step aside, but he didn't stop. Before she could even react, he shoved past her shoulder hard enough to tilt her forward, almost spilling the contents of her cart. "Hey," she said calmly, steadying herself. But the calmness in her voice did nothing to diffuse the tension. People behind them gasped. Some muttered curses. "Watch it," the man barked, his tone dripping with entitlement. But Lena didn't flinch, she didn't yell, she didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she adjusted the sleeve of her faded charcoal gray hoodie, a movement that seemed casual to any observer. But the push had revealed something. A sliver of cloth stitched into the uniform shirt beneath. Something that, in an instant, froze the man's blood. The Ranger tab. The man's eyes widened as if he had just glimpsed a ghost. For a fraction of a second, his bravado faltered. He stumbled backward, words caught in his throat. Lena's calm gaze held him like a predator staring at prey that wasn't going to run. You're a Ranger," he whispered, his tone a mixture of awe and fear. "Would you like to try that shove again?" Lena asked quietly, her voice low but edged with a dangerous calm. Her fingers brushed the strap of her backpack, coiled and ready, though she hadn't even broken a sweat. The man's Adam's apple bobbed nervously. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, though the store's air conditioning was more than adequate. Around them, the line of shoppers seemed frozen, caught in a moment they would replay in their heads for hours. Lena, however, didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her presence alone carried the weight of someone who had walked through fire and come out unscathed, someone who didn't need to threaten to be dangerous, because everyone who knew what that tab meant understood it already. The man, now pale, muttered something incoherent and stepped back, retreating a pace or two. Lena adjusted her hoodie, letting the fabric fall back into place. As she waited for the line to move, she replayed the shove in her head. She didn't miss a beat, didn't fail to notice the posture of the man, the way his shoulders tensed, the micro movements of his fingers. A reflex almost imperceptible. It told her more than the shove itself. He was used to getting his way, used to people backing down. And now he was realizing that not everyone did. The line inched forward. Lena reached the checkout, placing her items on the conveyor belt. The cashier, a young man with dark circles under his eyes and a name tag that read Trevon, glanced at her quickly, probably sensing the tension but not knowing what it meant. "You need bags?" he asked automatically. "No, thank you," Lena said, sliding her card across the reader. Outside, the sun blazed down on the asphalt like a furnace. Sweat prickled at Lena's neck. She stepped into the heat, the groceries in her cart rattling with the momentum of movement. She breathed in the heavy, humid air, letting the mundane normality of it try to settle her. Almost succeeded. Until footsteps sounded behind her, fast, uneven, panicked. She glanced over her shoulder. The man from the grocery store, Ethan, as he would later introduce himself, was coming toward her. His face was still red, but now it was tinged with something else: nervousness, fear, an urgent need to explain himself. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't see the tab, he said, catching his breath. You don't have to see anything to treat people with respect, Lena replied, keeping her voice steady, careful. No one else was around, but she was aware, hyper-aware. That tag on her shoulder was more than cloth. It was a warning, a signal, a story she hadn't intended to tell anyone. That's fair, Ethan said quickly. I'm Ethan. Look, I feel awful. Can I at least, he trailed off, trying to offer to carry her groceries, though the gesture felt almost comically insufficient against the aura she radiated. Lena gave him a measured look. It's fine, she said, but the words carried an edge. Not anger, but a test, a gauging of intent. Ethan's gaze shifted. His eyes flicked to a scar barely visible along her jawline. The corner of his mouth twitched, as if recognizing the type of history that scar represented. Were you in the 75th? He asked, voice dropping to a cautious whisper. Lena froze. Civilians didn't ask that question lightly. Why? She asked, tilting her head slightly. Because I used to be Army too, he admitted almost shamefully. Her pulse ticked upward, a subtle recognition, a shared history of sleepless nights and adrenaline-fueled instincts. Before she could probe further, a loud pop shattered the quiet hum of the parking lot. It echoed across the asphalt, sharp, jarring, primal. Lena's body reacted before her mind could process it. She dropped instinctively into a crouch. Her knees bent, arms slightly raised, eyes scanning for threats. Ethan froze beside her, mirroring her movements almost perfectly. His surprise was genuine, and yet, somewhere deep in his subconscious, he understood. Old habit, he muttered, realizing he had reacted the same way she did. Lena's jaw tightened. She had not expected company today. She had not expected danger, but she always expected the unexpected. He glanced at her, voice trembling slightly. Sorry, I don't even know what that was. You don't need to, Lena said. Her eyes flicked back toward the grocery store, toward the parking lot, scanning the shadows. Something about the tension in the air was off. Not normal, not everyday danger, something else. Something that made the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Ethan swallowed, suddenly aware that whatever had caused that pop, whether car backfire, gunshot, or something worse, was enough to remind him why he had left the Army. And Lena, she felt a familiar, unshakable sensation. Something was wrong. She adjusted her hoodie again, the way she always did, though now it felt symbolic, shielding the tab that defined her, that marked her. The Ranger tab. Ethan stepped closer hesitantly. You handle things like that all the time, he asked. Lena didn't answer. Instead, she fixed him with a gaze so calm, so quiet, that it made him rethink his previous assumptions about this woman he had just shoved past. He had thought she was ordinary. He had thought she would step aside. He was very, very wrong. And as Lena pushed the cart toward her truck, she had no idea that this encounter, the shove, the reveal of the tab, the strange pop, would pull her into a web of danger she hadn't seen in years. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the world notices the invisible. And when it does, it hits hard. Ethan's boots scuffed the cracked asphalt as he stumbled to catch up to Lena, who was already maneuvering her cart toward her truck. The sun beat down like a relentless spotlight, but Lena's attention was elsewhere, on the subtle tension in the air, on the prickling sensation crawling along her spine. She had felt that exact warning thousands of times before in the field, though never in the mundane chaos of a grocery store parking lot. You're a ranger, Ethan repeated, voice trembling slightly. Yes, Lena said without looking back, voice steady, flat, almost bored, but underneath her heart was tightening. She hadn't wanted her tab to be seen. Not here, not now, not by a stranger whose reaction betrayed both awe and fear. I didn't mean to shove you, Ethan said, finally matching her pace. I didn't know. His words tumbled over themselves, a clumsy jumble of apology and surprise. You don't have to see anything to treat people with respect, Lena said evenly. Every syllable was deliberate, measured. The words weren't meant to shame him, they were a warning. Civilians often didn't understand the weight that tag carried. They couldn't know what it meant to survive the unthinkable, to endure the chaos and come out on the other side, scars intact but invisible. "I know that now," Ethan admitted, glancing at her shoulder one more time as if he could read her history there. I'm Ethan." "Lena," she replied simply. She didn't offer a handshake, didn't offer a smile, but the calm, unflinching eye contact told him she was assessing him, calculating, like she always did. Ethan's gaze wandered briefly to the scar along her jawline. A thin line, pale now but unmistakable. He swallowed hard. That scar didn't come from a fall or a car accident. Not to someone with a posture and presence like hers. That scar was history, battlefield history, and he recognized it. "Were you in the 75th?" he asked cautiously. Lena's shoulders tensed imperceptibly. That question was deliberate, probing. Civilians didn't ask that lightly. "Why?" she asked, raising a single eyebrow. "Because I used to be Army too," Ethan admitted. His voice was quiet now, almost hesitant. "Not like you, obviously, not Rangers, but I know the life." Lena's pulse ticked upward. Recognition flickered in her mind, like seeing the shadow of someone she once trusted, someone who had walked through the same fire in different wars. Her eyes scanned him quickly, catching the micro-expressions. Tension in his jaw, the tiny tremble of his fingers, the way he avoided direct confrontation but instinctively mirrored her movements. And then came the sound that froze them both, a sharp, metallic pop that split the air, reverberating off the asphalt and metal sides of the cars parked nearby. Lena's reaction was instantaneous. She dropped low, crouching with her legs coiled, arms ready to spring, eyes sweeping the surroundings with surgical precision. Her brain cataloged every sound, every shadow, every movement. Her training kicked in, automatic, ingrained. Ethan, to his surprise, mirrored her movements perfectly. He froze beside her, wide-eyed. What was that?" he whispered. "Doesn't matter right now," Lena said, her voice calm but edged with steel. Her eyes never stopped scanning the lot, noting tire positions, distances, escape routes. She had done this countless times before, reacting before danger fully materialized. It was instinct, muscle memory, and sheer necessity. Ethan's brow furrowed. You handle things like that all the time." "Always," she replied without a hint of pride. It wasn't pride. It was reality. Danger was never polite, never convenient, and certainly never waited for grocery runs. For a moment the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them. The other shoppers were gone in her mind, reduced to a blurry, insignificant backdrop. Lena noticed everything. The tension in Ethan's shoulders, the unsteady rhythm of his breathing, the slight quiver in his fingers. He wasn't used to fear, but he was learning fast. Ethan finally exhaled shakily. "Old habit," he muttered, almost apologetically. I've had a few years of reacting before thinking, too." Lena's eyes flicked to him. She didn't smile, didn't nod, but something in her mind registered a tiny spark of curiosity. He wasn't just some civilian who had shoved her. He had instincts. He had experience, enough that he could be useful or dangerous depending on the next move. "Are you going to follow me?" she asked casually, though her tone hinted that she already knew the answer. Ethan hesitated. His gaze darted around, calculating, measuring the air, the shadows. Then he nodded slightly. Yeah, I think I should. My sister, she's in trouble." Lena froze. Trouble. That word carried weight, too much weight. It wasn't a casual slip. It was deliberate, purposeful. She had learned long ago that ordinary people didn't get trouble the way soldiers did. Ethan's voice broke her train of thought. She texted me. Something's happening and He stopped, eyes widening. "I think she's being followed." For Lena it was a spark, a jolt, a call to attention that went deeper than concern for a civilian life. Something primal stirred in her chest, a warning signal she couldn't ignore. She didn't need confirmation. Her instinct screamed it was true. "Where?" she asked immediately. Her voice was calm, but it carried the unmistakable undertone of command. Ethan swallowed. "Gas station, corner of Willow and Main." "Let's go," she said. The ride to the gas station was tense, Ethan driving too fast for the narrow rural streets, Lena scanning the edges of the road, every tree line, every empty lot. Her hands were folded calmly in her lap, but every nerve ending screamed. This wasn't random. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. When they arrived, the gas station was silent, deserted. The automatic doors swayed slightly in the heat, squeaking on their hinges. A single soda bottle lay on the pavement, kicked aside along with a crumpled receipt. A set of tire tracks across the dust indicated movement, but recent movement, hurried, deliberate. Ethan sprinted to the door. "Amelia," he shouted. Lena crouched near the tracks, scanning. Her boots pressed into the dirt, ready for pursuit. She saw something out of place, a scrap of red fabric snagged on a thorn branch. A jacket. Amelia's jacket. 3 sets of footprints led into the dense woods beyond the clearing. Not far, not long ago, but enough to tell Lena one thing clearly: this was no ordinary kidnapping. The people responsible weren't amateurs. They weren't petty thieves. "They didn't take her long ago," Lena said, her voice sharp, edged with cold calculation. Ethan's face went pale. How do you know?" "Fresh tire marks, displacement patterns, leaves torn, broken sticks, amateurs miss those," she said, her eyes flicked to him. "You need to move now." Ethan hesitated, uncertainty etched into his features. You're offering to help." Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her actions already spoke. She began moving toward the woods, crouching low, stepping quietly but with purpose. Ethan's hands shook as he followed. "Wait, you need." "Questions later," Lena said. "Right now we get her, then we talk." She could feel him noticing the weight behind her words, the unspoken history that powered every step she took. He didn't understand the depth of what he was following. He couldn't. Not yet. But he didn't step back. And as they approached the tree line, the forest ahead dark and humming with life, Lena felt the familiar thrill, the dangerous certainty that they were being watched. Not randomly, deliberately. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't know by whom. She didn't know why. But she knew one thing: her past, the Ranger tab, the training, the battles fought and survived. None of it had prepared her for what was coming. Yet she was ready. Because some instincts were not learned, they were born. And Lena Avery had them all. The woods awaited. And danger was already moving through it. The forest loomed before them like a living, breathing entity. Its canopy was thick and suffocating, blocking out most of the late afternoon sun. The air smelled of damp earth, pine, and the faint tang of something metallic, blood maybe, or just the natural decay of the underbrush. Lena moved ahead with a measured stealth, each step deliberate, boots sinking into moss-covered soil. Her senses stretched outward, absorbing every sound. The creak of a branch under a small animal's weight, the flutter of wings from an unseen bird, the whisper of leaves in the wind. Ethan trailed a few feet behind, clutching the rifle Lena had handed him. His grip was awkward, his stance untrained, yet there was a raw determination in his posture that Lena acknowledged with a quick, fleeting glance. He wasn't a ranger. He wasn't supposed to be. But he wanted to save his sister, and right now, that was enough to make him dangerous in his own way. "You've got to stay quiet," Lena whispered without looking back. "Don't make a sound." I'm fine," Ethan replied, though his voice quivered. He wasn't fine. He had never been in a situation like this, where the stakes weren't a game or a drill but real life, and the life of someone he loved hung in the balance. Lena noticed. Not the trembling of his hands, that was obvious, but the subtle way his eyes scanned the shadows for threats. He was instinctively aware, a survivor at heart, even if he lacked the refinement of a soldier trained for ambushes and kill zones. "Why they take her?" Ethan finally asked, breaking the tense silence. Lena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the shadowed depths ahead, picking out movement that no civilian would have noticed. "Not for her," she said finally, her voice low. "For you, she's leverage." Ethan stiffened. "Me?" "Yes," Lena said, crouching behind a fallen log. She gestured for him to stop and stay low. "Someone wants you, and they're using her as bait." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had imagined a dozen scenarios, but none had prepared him for this. His own sister caught up in a web of vengeance aimed at him. "Why me? I'm just a guy." "No," Lena said softly but firmly. "You're someone they think wronged them, and now they're trying to correct it. That's why they're professionals." Ethan glanced at her shoulder, at the faded Ranger tab partially hidden under the hoodie she had thrown back on. "And you?" "I'm here to make sure neither of you dies," Lena replied curtly. No bravado, no lecture, just fact. She crouched lower, listening. A branch snapped in the distance, far too deliberate to be a deer or a stray raccoon. Lena's head snapped toward the sound. She froze. Ethan followed her gaze. "Someone's coming," she whispered. "2 men minimum, heavily armed." Ethan's stomach tightened. His sister was already in their grasp, or at least in their domain, and they had no idea if the kidnappers were moving her closer or holding her at a fixed point. "We have to move," Lena said. She led him through a narrow trail barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Moss brushed against their shins, spiderwebs clung to their hair. Her mind worked in fast, deliberate calculations. Distances, angles, cover points, escape routes. Every step was measured, every pause a scan. Ethan stumbled once, but Lena caught him without breaking stride. Her hand was firm, unyielding, and for a moment he felt the raw force of her presence, someone who had survived explosions, ambushes, and firefights. Someone who had seen death and survived because she was smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anyone who tried to take her by surprise. "You should have stayed back," Ethan said, voice low but with a note of awe. "And let your sister die?" Lena asked without turning. "No, not my style." The trail ended abruptly in a small clearing. Lena crouched low behind a fallen tree and signaled Ethan to do the same. The clearing was empty, but the air hummed with tension, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "Where now?" Ethan whispered. "Observe first," Lena said. "Notice patterns, listen. Move only when the enemy is distracted." He did as told, glancing nervously at the tree line. Shadows shifted. Lena's sharp eyes caught movement, barely perceptible, but enough to identify 2 figures moving deliberately, scanning the underbrush. One of them had a radio, the other carried a rifle loosely in hand. Both were cautious, trained, not panicked. Professionals. "They're good," Ethan muttered. "Yes," Lena replied, her voice tight. "And that makes them predictable if you know how to read them." A cold gust of wind rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of something that made Lena's stomach tighten. Sweat slicked her palms, but she didn't allow herself to notice. She had done this thousands of times before. Each detail mattered. "You ready?" she whispered to Ethan. He nodded, swallowing hard. "As ready as I'll ever be." Lena rose slightly, moving forward, every muscle coiled like a spring. She kept her head low, eyes scanning, ears attuned to every sound. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant call of a bird, the subtle shift in wind direction. Every detail mattered. Then a faint sound, a girl's voice muffled, urgent. Lena froze, Ethan tensed. "Amelia," he hissed under his breath. "Yes," Lena said. "She's here close, stay sharp." They moved cautiously toward the sound, branches snapping softly under their feet. Lena's pulse was steady, her senses were heightened. She had learned long ago that in situations like this, hesitation could be fatal. The clearing ended at a line of trees leading into thicker underbrush. Lena signaled for Ethan to follow, and they slipped silently into the shadows. The forest seemed to close in around them. Light was patchy, shadows deep. The air grew cooler, damper, Every step brought the faintest scent of smoke or burnt wood, something not entirely natural. Then they reached a clearing again, and Lena's sharp eyes caught movement. Two men were standing near a small, dilapidated cabin. One held Amelia by the arm, the other stood guard, rifle raised but relaxed. Ethan's chest tightened. "That's her," he breathed. Lena didn't respond. She crouched, evaluating the distance, the angles, the cover. She traced a mental map of every obstacle, every potential advantage. The men were confident, but they weren't expecting her, not the ranger who had survived missions that left entire squads dead. "You've got one chance to reach her before they notice," Lena whispered. "Follow my lead. Do exactly what I do, no mistakes." Ethan nodded, fear and determination warring in his expression. She took a deep breath, muscles coiled, eyes scanning every detail one last time. And then, as they began to move forward, a snap rang out, louder this time. The men turned instantly. Amelia screamed. And Lena realized with a cold jolt that the game had begun, and she was already inside the hunter's trap. The air was thick with tension as Lena crept through the forest, every step measured, every muscle coiled like a spring. Her eyes flicked from shadow to shadow, calculating distances, angles, and escape routes. She moved like a ghost, silent and lethal, a figure molded by years of war and clandestine operations. Behind her, Ethan struggled to keep pace, gripping the rifle with hands slick with sweat. I don't know how to do this," he whispered, his voice trembling as he ducked behind a fallen tree. "Then stop thinking like a civilian," Lena replied without turning. "Think like someone who wants to survive. Follow my lead, nothing more." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. He had no idea what he was following, or who. But the fear in his chest was matched by a desperation that Lena recognized all too well, the drive to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves. The faint sound of a girl's voice broke through the ambient forest noise, urgent, panicked, trembling. "Amelia," Ethan breathed, and Lena's head snapped toward the direction of the sound. "Yes, that's her. Stay low. Move slow," Lena whispered. She crept ahead, weaving between trees and low-hanging branches, silent as the wind that shifted through the forest. Then Lena froze. Her instincts screamed. A scrap of red fabric caught on a thorn bush. The color was vivid, almost glowing against the muted greens and browns of the forest floor. Amelia's jacket. Ethan's eyes widened. "She's here." "Yes," Lena said grimly, "but not safe yet. Stay sharp." The forest cleared slightly ahead, revealing the cabin Lena had spotted earlier. The structure was small, weathered, and abandoned-looking, its wooden planks gray and warped. Smoke curled faintly from a chimney that appeared to be mostly decorative, probably nothing more than a signal or a leftover habit of the kidnappers. Two men were visible in the clearing, each armed and alert. One gripped Amelia roughly by the arm, his face obscured by a hood. She struggled, crying out, but they silenced her with a harsh shove. The second man stood slightly behind, rifle raised but held loosely, scanning the perimeter. "Watch the exit," Lena whispered to Ethan. "They've got eyes everywhere." Ethan nodded, swallowing. His heart thumped violently against his ribcage. This was nothing like he had imagined, nothing like the scenarios he had played out in his head. Real danger was sharp, immediate, and unforgiving. Lena crouched behind a low rock, calculating her approach. She traced the angle of the nearest man's line of sight, then the others, mapping a mental grid of the open ground, the shadows, and the cover points. Every instinct screamed at her to act, but she knew that haste was a killer. "You're going to move first," she told Ethan. "I'll cover the angle. Stay low, stay silent, and keep your eyes on me." He nodded, hands shaking slightly as he crouched lower. Lena's eyes scanned the trees again, noticing a glint, a faint reflection of metal among the foliage. Someone else was watching, someone waiting. "Damn it," Lena muttered under her breath. She had underestimated this. Not the men with Amelia, but someone else lurking, someone with knowledge of her approach. She pushed it down and focused, one step at a time. The first man turned his head, catching a shadow. Lena pressed Ethan back. Freeze. He froze. She waited. The man relaxed, convinced whatever it was wasn't worth his attention. Move, Lena whispered. Ethan followed silently, stepping over roots and broken branches, crawling through the underbrush inch by inch. They reached the edge of the clearing 30 feet from the cabin. Lena signaled Ethan to stop. She peeked around the edge of a fallen tree. Both men were momentarily distracted, one adjusting Amelia's jacket, the other checking the perimeter. Now, she whispered. Lena lunged forward, low, fast, her movements a blur. She hit the first man in the ribs with an elbow, forcing him to release Amelia. Amelia stumbled backward, crying, but Lena grabbed her arm, pulling her into cover behind a tree. The second man reacted instantly, raising his rifle. But Lena was faster. She sidestepped, slammed the butt of her hand against his wrist, twisting it until the weapon clattered to the ground. She kicked it out of reach and shoved him back into the tree. Run, she shouted to Ethan. Ethan obeyed, moving forward with adrenaline-fueled precision. He grabbed Amelia, who clung to him desperately, sobbing. It's okay, I've got you, he reassured her, though his voice trembled. Lena covered their retreat, watching the men regroup. They weren't amateurs. They were calculating, disciplined, dangerous. But Lena wasn't just anyone either. She had trained for this her entire adult life. Every instinct, every muscle memory, every hard-earned reflex was honed to this moment. The first man lunged at Lena from behind the cabin. She ducked, pivoted, and used his momentum to throw him into the wall, knocking him out cold. The second man tried to flank her from the side, but Lena anticipated the move, grabbing a branch to swing herself off balance and tackle him into the dirt. Ethan and Amelia ran toward the edge of the clearing, but Lena's sharp eyes caught movement in the shadows beyond. A figure stepping out of cover, slow, deliberate, confident. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't one of the men with Amelia. This was someone else, someone bigger, someone who knew exactly who she was. Ethan, get her out, Lena ordered, her voice low, urgent. Now. Ethan bolted, pulling Amelia with him. The girl clung tightly, her small body trembling against him. Lena turned to face the new figure, calculating, scanning for weapons, for tells, for weaknesses. He moved with the assurance of a trained soldier, someone who had been in combat, someone who had survived battles she had never forgotten. You're faster than I expected, the man said, voice low, controlled. Lena's eyes narrowed. Who are you? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, deliberately, forcing her to move back. His eyes caught the glint of her Ranger tab. I've been waiting for this, he said finally. The Ranger who thinks she can disappear. Lena's jaw tightened. Her hand itched toward the knife strapped at her thigh, but she didn't move yet. This wasn't just a fight for Amelia anymore. It was a fight for her own life. The man's smile was slow, confident, predatory. You've left quite a reputation behind, he continued. And now it's time to settle old scores. Lena's pulse raced. The training, the deployments, the missions, all of it had prepared her for moments like this. But there was something in his voice, in the weight of his presence, that hit deeper. Ethan's distant voice called out, Lena, come on. She cast one last glance toward him and Amelia. They were almost safe. Almost. But she knew she couldn't let him follow. Not yet. Not while the threat of this man hung over them. Lena inhaled, centering herself, muscles coiled, every instinct screaming for action. Then, with a fluid motion that seemed almost unreal, she charged. And the forest seemed to hold its breath. The forest seemed to close in around Lena, every shadow a potential threat, every sound amplified by the heavy silence. The man who had emerged from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, movements precise, was not just any adversary. He had trained, survived, fought battles Lena recognized instinctively. He was the kind of enemy that didn't panic, didn't make mistakes, and he was moving toward them now, eyes locked on hers, every step deliberate. "Run!" Lena shouted at Ethan and Amelia, her voice cutting through the forest's tension. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Amelia's hand and sprinted toward the thicker trees, mud squelching under his boots. Amelia clung to him, her small frame shaking but moving with all the determination she could muster. Lena stayed back for a fraction of a second longer, assessing the man. Her ranger instincts flared. Every instinct, every muscle, every decision she had made in life boiled down to this moment. She was outnumbered. Well, outnumbered only in a sense. She had the advantage of training, agility, and the element of surprise. He had brute strength and cold precision. The man closed the distance with almost imperceptible ease. Lena darted to the side, ducking behind a large oak. Her eyes scanned the environment. Branches overhead could be used to swing, roots could trip, uneven terrain could slow him down. Every inch of this forest was a battlefield, and she knew it intimately. He followed, not hesitating, not faltering. Each step he took seemed calculated to corner her, to predict her moves before she made them. "Not bad," he said, his voice low, almost a growl, "but predictable." Lena didn't answer. Words were wasted. Every motion, every stance, every subtle shift in weight conveyed more than speech ever could. She pivoted, sliding low behind a fallen log, keeping her eyes on him. She noted his breathing, the flex of his muscles, the slight tension in his fingers. Ethan and Amelia were nearly at the edge of a clearing. Lena's pulse quickened as she realized the man wasn't pursuing them directly. He was aiming to cut them off, to force Lena into a corner. She made a decision. The first move had to be decisive. Lena sprung from behind the log, shoulder first, hitting him in the chest with the momentum of a well-trained combatant. He stumbled back but recovered instantly, his hand shooting toward the knife at his belt. Lena anticipated it. With a low, precise kick, she knocked his wrist aside, twisting his arm and forcing him down to the ground momentarily. They grappled, each movement a test of strength, agility, and willpower. Lena felt the familiar burn in her muscles, the adrenaline spike, the sharp focus that came when life depended entirely on split-second decisions. The man rolled, regained his footing, and lunged again. Lena sidestepped, grabbing a thick branch from the forest floor and swinging it with controlled precision. The branch connected with his shoulder, forcing him backward. He staggered, but only slightly, and the glint of a knife caught the fatting sunlight as he drew it. Lena's jaw tightened. She had to end this quickly. A prolonged fight would give him time to adjust, to learn, to exploit a weakness. She feinted left, then rolled under his swing, bringing her knee up into his side. He grunted but didn't fall. She twisted, grabbed a vine and swung herself over him, landing behind him and kicking him forward into a tangle of underbrush. The man growled, frustration edging his precise movements. He lunged again, knife flashing in the dim light. Lena parried, grabbed his wrist and forced him to the ground. With her knee pressing into his chest and her hand against his throat, she whispered, "Enough." For a brief moment the forest was silent. Leaves rustled, birds scattered, and Lena held him there, chest heaving, muscles taut. "You don't understand," he said, venom in his tone. "You think you can stop this, but it's bigger than you, bigger than her, bigger than anyone you've ever fought." "I understand enough," Lena replied, her voice cold, controlled. "And that's why you're going to leave now, or you're not walking out of this forest alive." He struggled, then froze, realizing that the calm precision in her eyes matched the lethal efficiency of her actions. He wasn't going to win. Not here. Not now. Lena released him just enough to watch him stumble back into the shadows. He didn't flee entirely, but he retreated, waiting for another opportunity, a testy predator biding his time. Turning, Lena sprinted toward Ethan and Amelia. They had reached the denser part of the forest, shadows folding over them like a protective blanket. Amelia's small hand clutched Ethan's tightly, her face pale but relieved. "You okay?" Lena asked, voice softening slightly as she came alongside them. Amelia nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. I'm okay." Ethan exhaled shakily. "Thanks to you." Lena offered no response. There wasn't time for thanks, not when the man in the shadows still lived, not when danger still loomed. She scanned the trees again. Someone had been tracking them before, and she knew instinctively that he would not give up so easily. Whoever he was, he knew who she was, and that knowledge was dangerous. "Where now?" Ethan asked, voice barely above a whisper. "We move fast, stay low," Lena instructed. "We go deeper into the woods. We find a place to hide, assess, and plan our next move. You need to stay alert. One mistake and they'll find us again." The forest grew darker as they moved, thick with foliage, shadows stretching like claws over the uneven ground. Lena's senses were on high alert. Every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves, every distant animal call could be a threat or a warning. As they pushed deeper, Lena's mind replayed the encounter with the man, the way he had anticipated her moves, the confidence in his attacks. He wasn't ordinary. He was dangerous. More dangerous than anyone she had faced in years outside of a combat zone. And he knew her. That thought made her pulse quicken. Someone who knew her history, someone who could recognize her Ranger tab in a random parking lot, was not coincidental. They reached a small hollow, partially hidden by fallen trees and thick underbrush. Lena gestured for Ethan and Amelia to stay low. She scanned the surroundings, noting vantage points, potential exits, and weak spots. "Rest for a minute," she instructed. "Catch your breath, stay quiet." Ethan sank to the ground, breathing heavily. Amelia curled against him, her small body trembling. Lena stayed standing, moving slowly to the edge of the hollow, peering into the forest. The shadows shifted. Movement, faint, deliberate, someone watching, waiting. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She had protected countless lives before, but this was different. This was personal, and the stakes were now impossibly high. She couldn't let her guard down, not for a second. The man who had confronted her earlier was still out there. He had knowledge, skill, and patience. And Lena knew that he wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The forest was silent again, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. Lena's eyes scanned the trees, calculating, preparing. The hunt was far from over. And somewhere in the shadows, the predator waited. The sun had dipped lower, its dying light casting long, jagged shadows through the dense forest. The air was thick with the scent of earth, pine, and sweat. Lena moved cautiously, eyes scanning every angle, every rustle in the underbrush. Ethan trailed close behind, clutching Amelia's hand tightly. The girl's small, trembling form clung to him like a lifeline, a fragile tether to the world they were fighting to survive in. "Lena," Ethan whispered, voice tight. "We can't keep running forever. He's not letting this go." Lena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes narrowed as she caught a flicker of movement up ahead, a shadow among the trees that didn't belong. The man from before, the one who had recognized her Ranger tab, was there, waiting. "You ready?" Lena asked, voice low, sharp. She didn't wait for an answer. The question wasn't for Ethan, it was for herself. She had no choice now but to face the threat head-on. The man stepped out into the faint light, tall, imposing, exuding confidence. He had anticipated their path, just as Lena had anticipated his. For a moment, predator and predator locked eyes, neither willing to blink first. "You're persistent," he said, voice calm but edged with menace. "I'll give you that." Lena's jaw tightened. She could feel every heartbeat, every twitch of muscle. This wasn't just about protecting Ethan or Amelia anymore. It was about survival, about the consequences of being seen, being known, being hunted. Ethan whispered behind her, "Who is he?" "No time," Lena said tersely. "Move." They pressed forward into a narrower section of the forest. The terrain grew uneven, roots and rocks jutting out, fallen branches threatening to trip them. Lena's senses were hyper-focused. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the wind told a story. Suddenly, a branch snapped. The man ahead stiffened. Lena froze, instinct screaming. She pivoted slightly, just enough to pull Ethan and Amelia behind a cluster of trees. The man's eyes flicked toward them, narrowing. "You can't hide forever," he said. Lena pressed her lips together, suppressing a low growl. He had the confidence of someone who had survived countless missions, someone who had tracked and killed with precision. But she was Lena Avery, a ranger, a ghost in her own right, someone who had faced worse than this and lived. She gestured for Ethan and Amelia to follow her along a thin path veiled by ferns and underbrush. They moved silently, shadows among shadows, until the man's figure loomed again, blocking their path. "You're running out of options," he said, stepping closer, knife glinting faintly in the dim light. "You can't protect them forever." Lena's eyes flicked to the ground, calculating distances, angles, and escape routes. There was a ridge nearby, a small clearing beyond it. If she could reach it, they'd have cover and a vantage point. But to get there, she'd have to draw him away, risk herself to protect Ethan and Amelia. "You won't get her," Lena said, her voice low but firm. "Not while I'm alive." The man smiled faintly, almost cruelly. "We'll see about that." Lena lunged first, moving with the speed and precision of someone trained to react before thought. The man anticipated the move, and their bodies collided with a grunt. He was strong, but Lena was faster, leveraging her momentum to shove him off balance. Ethan and Amelia sprinted toward the ridge, Lena covering their retreat. Every step was calculated, every motion precise. She felt the burn in her muscles, the sharp edge of adrenaline, the undeniable clarity of focus that came when life depended on split-second decisions. The man recovered quickly, knife flashing. Lena twisted, grabbed a branch and swung, connecting with his arm. He stumbled, but his grip on the knife remained firm. "You'll have to do better than that," he said, voice tight with controlled anger. Lena didn't respond. She ducked under his next strike, rolled, and used her momentum to push him toward the edge of the clearing. He recovered instantly, lunged again, but she was ready. She sidestepped, tripping him with her foot, and he fell heavily onto the leaf-strewn ground. But before she could act, a sharp whistle echoed through the forest, a signal. Lena froze. The man's eyes flicked in the same direction, and she realized with a jolt that he wasn't alone. Others were moving through the trees, their footsteps muffled but deliberate. Ethan reached the ridge with Amelia, breathless. "Lena, hurry!" he shouted. Lena's mind raced. She couldn't abandon them, but she couldn't fight multiple trained assailants head-on without risking all of them. She needed a plan, a way to buy time, to draw the threat away, to protect them. She grabbed a handful of leaves and dirt, tossing it toward the opposite side of the clearing. The movement caught the man's attention. "Go," she shouted. Ethan and Amelia didn't hesitate, scrambling up the ridge while Lena faced the man again. He advanced, knife poised, eyes cold. "You can't stop this," he said. "I already have," Lena replied, voice calm, deadly. She pivoted, using the ridge and trees as cover, ducking under his strikes, parrying with branches, twisting her body with the precision of countless training exercises. The man lunged again, and Lena twisted, delivering a sharp elbow to his ribs. He staggered, grunted, and fell to one knee. She seized the moment, pressing the edge of her hand against his shoulder, forcing him backward. "You're done chasing ghosts," Lena said, voice sharp. "Now disappear." He hesitated, assessing her, realizing she wasn't bluffing. Slowly he backed away, glancing toward the underbrush. Others had emerged briefly, then receded, unsure how to proceed against someone with Lena's skill. Lena didn't relax. Her eyes scanned the shadows, noting every potential threat, every subtle shift in movement. She didn't lower her guard, not for a second. Ethan reached her side, holding Amelia protectively. "Are we safe?" he asked, voice trembling. For now, Lena said, but not for long. They'll regroup. They always do. Amelia clung to Ethan, tears streaking her cheeks. I was so scared, she whispered. I know, Lena said softly, but you're okay now, that's what matters. Ethan glanced at her, awe and relief mixed in his gaze. You're incredible. I don't even know how you. Lena cut him off. Don't thank me. Surviving isn't about being incredible. It's about being prepared, being alert, and making every second count. They moved deeper into the forest, Lena leading, eyes constantly scanning. She knew the man and his group weren't finished. They were professionals, patient and cunning, and they knew she had someone they wanted. Every snap of a branch, every shadow, every flicker of movement made her pulse quicken. The stakes had never been higher. And as they pressed forward into the thickest part of the woods, Lena realized that turning back was no longer an option. There was no retreat, no safe haven. Every decision, every step, every instinct mattered. The forest swallowed them in shadows, leaving only the faint trail of their passage. But Lena knew the hunter was still out there, somewhere, calculating, waiting, preparing for the moment when she would slip, even for a second. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, feeling the reassuring weight of her equipment. Every tool, every weapon, every ounce of training was ready. And Lena Avery was never unprepared. The forest had grown nearly pitch black, the final light of dusk fading into a suffocating darkness that pressed down on them like a weight. Lena led Ethan and Amelia through the thick underbrush, branches clawing at their clothing, roots threatening to trip them with every step. Her heart pounded, not just from exertion but from anticipation. She could feel it. The predator was close, waiting, patient. He knew her every move, her every instinct. Lena, Ethan's whisper broke through the oppressive silence. We can't keep going. We're exhausted. We need to stop. Lena shook her head, voice low but firm. We stop when we've made it out. Not before. He's still out there. And if we rest, we make it easier for him. Amelia clutched Ethan's arm tightly, her small frame trembling. I don't want to go back, she whispered. You won't, Lena reassured her, her voice softening slightly, though her eyes never stopped scanning the shadows. I won't let anyone touch you. The forest opened slightly into a clearing, moonlight breaking through the canopy in silvery shards. Lena froze, recognizing the place. The ridge ahead would give them a tactical advantage, a higher position, better visibility, and a natural bottleneck. She gestured for Ethan and Amelia to follow quietly. As they moved toward the ridge, the sound of a branch snapping behind them made Lena spin on instinct. The man who had stalked them, the one who knew her, emerged, flanked by two others. You've come far, he said, voice calm, deliberate, but this ends now. Lena's eyes narrowed. She recognized him immediately. One of the few people who had been part of her deployment in Afghanistan, a former ally turned rogue mercenary with a vendetta. He had studied her, learned her patterns, and now sought revenge, or leverage. You, she said flatly, stepping in front of Ethan and Amelia. You're the reason this is happening. He smiled faintly, almost cruelly. I'm the consequence. You've survived missions that left entire squads dead, and yet here you are, playing hero in the woods with civilians. Lena didn't flinch. Her hands rested near the weapons at her belt. Every movement she made was deliberate, precise, calculated. This was the culmination of everything she had trained for, everything she had endured. You won't get them, she said, not while I'm alive. The man took a step closer. We'll see about that. Suddenly, he lunged. Lena's reflexes were instantaneous. She sidestepped, grabbing a fallen branch to parry his attack. He swung a knife, precise and fast, but Lena anticipated every movement, countering with skill honed over years of combat. Ethan and Amelia crouched behind a rock, watching in awe and fear as Lena engaged the man. Every strike, every dodge, every pivot was a dance of life and death. She moved like she had no fear, but inside her heart raced, not from panic, but from adrenaline and the weight of responsibility. "You've grown predictable," Lena said, striking his shoulder, forcing him back. "Too many missions, too many patterns. You're relying on memory instead of adapting." He growled, lunging again, faster this time. Lena twisted, using his momentum to throw him to the ground. He rolled, regained his footing, and attacked again. The fight was brutal, each strike precise, each block calculated. The forest seemed to hold its breath as they clashed, two highly trained combatants testing limits and instincts. Ethan whispered to Amelia, "Stay down, don't move." Amelia's grip on his arm tightened, tears streaking her dirt-smeared cheeks. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," Ethan whispered, "but we've got her, she's protecting us. We'll get through this." Lena feinted left, striking at his knee, forcing him to stumble. She followed, flipping over his back and landing behind him, grabbing his arm and twisting. He grunted, knife clattering to the ground. She pressed her hand to his chest, pinning him to the forest floor. "This ends now," she said, eyes cold, lethal. "You either leave or you die." For a long moment he glared up at her, chest heaving, eyes calculating. Then slowly, deliberately, he nodded. "This isn't over," he said, voice tight. "But for now, you've won." Lena released him, stepping back, keeping her eyes locked on him as he retreated into the shadows with his companions. She didn't relax. Not yet. She scanned the forest, every sense on high alert, every muscle ready. Ethan and Amelia emerged from cover, rushing toward her. Amelia threw her arms around Lena's waist, sobbing. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're safe," Lena said softly, holding her close for a brief moment before stepping back. "And that's all that matters." Ethan exhaled, relief flooding his face. "I don't know how to thank you, how can I ever?" Lena shook her head. "You don't. Surviving isn't about thanks. It's about being prepared, being alert, and making every second count. You've learned that today, whether you know it or not." Amelia clung to Ethan, still trembling. Lena glanced at the ridge, at the path they would take to safety. "We move now. Keep low, stay quiet, and don't make a sound." The forest was eerily silent as they moved. The threat hadn't vanished. It had merely receded, patient and calculating. Lena knew the man and his associates would regroup, plan, and perhaps return. But for now, she had bought them time, protection, and survival. As they emerged from the thickest part of the forest, the first hints of dawn began to filter through the trees. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of pine and earth. Ethan and Amelia's steps were lighter now, hope and relief replacing fear. Lena's eyes scanned the horizon. The battle wasn't over, not entirely, but they had survived the night, survived the hunt, and survived each other. "You're going to be okay," she said quietly, almost to herself as much as to them. "We're not finished, but you're alive, that's what counts." Ethan turned to her, eyes wide. "I don't know how to repay you. I don't even know how to explain what just happened." Lena shook her head. "You don't have to, just remember what I said. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and don't underestimate the world or the people who survive it." Amelia tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go home now?" "Yes," Lena said softly. "Home is next, safety is next, and then life." They began moving together, Lena leading, eyes constantly scanning the forest, body still ready for the unexpected. Every step carried purpose, every breath was measured, every sense alert. Behind them, shadows shifted, but Lena didn't glance back. Not yet. She had given them a chance to live, a chance to survive, and sometimes that was all that mattered. The sun rose higher, cutting through the remaining darkness. Birds sang, leaves rustled. The forest, which had been a battlefield hours before, seemed almost peaceful, deceptively so. Lena glanced at Ethan and Amelia, their faces illuminated by the early light. They were alive. That was enough, for now. And for Lena Avery, survival was never about glory. It was about keeping the people around her alive, no matter the cost. The predator remained in the shadows, waiting for another day, but for the first time in a long time, Lena felt almost human, almost free. She led them out of the forest, step by step, toward the promise of safety, toward dawn, toward the life they had fought so hard to protect. The forest swallowed the shadows behind them. The danger wasn't gone, but they had survived. And that, Lena knew, was victory enough.